Hi, this is Charles Hoskinson broadcasting live from untamed wild Mongolia, live in Ulaanbaatar, the capital. It is a beautiful day, Saturday, the 16th, 2022, for some of you, the 15th. And hopefully the internet holds up. Hopefully we're able to have a nice, productive, beautiful session. It's been a long time since I've had a chance to have a proper AMA with you guys and gals, but I really do enjoy them and I love them. So let's get through it. I was yesterday out in Ugi, which is the mountainous city in the western part of the country, mostly Cossack with the eagle hunters. And then the day before that, I was out in the Gobi Desert and I saw the flaming cliffs and I hung out with all the desert nomads and got a chance to play around with the camels and the rest of the gangs. So it's been a really interesting trip. The first day I was here, literally got off the plane, head to a presidential reception at the presidential palace. I was gracious enough to get an invitation. I'll show you guys. These presidential invitations are pretty cool. So here's what it looks like. And then they give you all the details and the official seal and so forth. So that's nifty. I got a chance to hang out with the U.S. ambassador in Mongolia and a chance to see all the movers and shakers. President welcomed all of us very warmly. He still has his imperial guard. So they have the horsemen with the leather armor and the bow and everything like that. And the palace is actually built in a beautiful private valley. So Mongolia has grown a lot. Since we opened the market 3 years ago, there were less than 2,000 holders of ADA. There's now 140,000 in a country of only 3 million people, which is pretty remarkable growth considering there's very little marketing that had been done here. It's just word of mouth and organic growth in jurisdiction. And when we came here, there were 2 cryptocurrency exchanges. Now there are about 14. A lot of NFT projects, a lot of really interesting things floating around. Everything from they want to do gold-backed stable coins to art projects to restoration projects to educational initiatives. One of the reasons why we're here is we did a Haskell training class in Mongolia right when COVID broke out. And because of COVID, we weren't able to do it in person. Normally, we actually fly out here. Our director of education comes, Lars Brunius, and he gets to learn from the local culture and ingratiate himself in that respect. Unfortunately, it had to be done remotely. And I promised that when COVID receded a bit, I would come to Mongolia and when the borders are open again and actually hold a proper graduation. So that's what we're doing today, is that we're holding here in Ubi a graduation for all the Haskell students that attended and finished the course. We hired about, I think, 3 or so who were the best candidates from that class. And our hope is to make this a reoccurring thing where we keep training new people. We had a great meeting with the minister, dinner with the Minister of Digital Innovation and Communication. She's a pretty remarkable woman, graduated from high school at 14, college at 18, went to Oxford, and now she is in charge of digital transformation for the entire country. And I believe that blockchain can be a major pillar of that, from everything from national ID to supply chain assurances. So a lot of stuff is happening, and it's really cool to be here, and it's cool to be back on the road. I really miss this place. Mongolia is just really amazing. There's so many amazing things in the geology, in the landscape. It does remind me a bit about kind of a roll-up between Colorado, Utah, and Wyoming. And then you see the culture. The Cossack culture is totally different than the desert culture, and it's very different in the city. Of course, we met the Who, not the WHO Who, but the HU Who, which is a famous Mongolian rock band, if you guys are interested. Really good music. They were at the presidential reception. We also saw some throat singing and other things in the countryside, and then some traditional Kazakh music out in the west. So it's real fun to see these things. When you spend some time with nomads, there needs to be some reflection on the meaning of economic identity. When we talk about economic identity, I don't like the term financial inclusion. Financial inclusion, to me, says you're welcome to be part of my system. So you remove agency and autonomy from people. You're saying you have to join what we have. I like the term instead economic identity or economic agency because it says you have equality with everybody. You're allowed to live the life that you want to live, to be in the place that you want to be, to have the customs you want to have. And you still have access to the financial markets. Those Cossack eagle hunters, they love what they do. And for the most part, they're mostly untouched by modernity, modern society. There's some things here and there, like they use Facebook Messenger and they have a solar panel and they use motorcycles instead of, dirt bikes instead of camels and things like that to get around. Okay. But they're just as comfortable on the back of a horse with an eagle out in the middle of nowhere as they are on the back of a motorcycle or in a city. So, how do you give people like that identity and agency so that they can participate in the world economy, but they can stay as nomads if they choose? That's really the magic of what we do as an industry. And it was really reassuring to see that we have a path to this. We call it RealFi. And you have levels of RealFi, level 1, level 2, level 3. So the first level of RealFi is that you have infrastructure. So you need telecommunications, energy, and computing. So you need the ability to move packets of information around. You need devices to process them. And obviously those devices require electricity to power them. Now, if none of that is decentralized and it's all controlled by one actor, cryptocurrencies don't matter. Digital identity doesn't matter because you can be shut out by a single actor. When you look at the second layer, you need identity. And identity has two big parts. There's verification and reputation. Verification is I make a factual claim. I've been to this place. I have this degree. I've done this thing. And it's true or false. Reputation is a value judgment. And so instead of yes, no, it's questions like, do you trust this person? Is this person reliable? It depends. I might trust them to mow my lawn, but not with my kids, that type of deal. Again, if any of that is centralized, cryptocurrencies don't work because in practice, all the kinds of things you'd want to do are strangled by that. This is one of the reasons why I get so irritated with Bitcoin maximalists. Because they seem to feel that just because they have this magic money, that's not even money, it's a digital commodity that just lives in the sky somewhere, that somehow this replaces the need for a decentralized power grid and a decentralized telecommunications grids and decentralized computing. And this completely obviates the need for identity systems, which are required to make these things useful and for commerce to work. It's effectively the lubricant of it. The third floor of RealFi are the actual applications. By the way, none of them run on Bitcoin. Peer-to-peer lending marketplaces, Oracle, stablecoins, these things. You have to do other weird stuff. So I think a lot about the RealFi stack, and we keep one foot in countries like Mongolia because it's a safe place for innovation. You have a lot of great tech entrepreneurs here. There's a lot of phenomenal companies here. There's great cell phone companies like Mobicom, and there's Zeal that's doing peer-to-peer lending. There's real stuff that's happening. On the other hand, 900,000, 1/3 of the country, are nomads. So what does that mean? It means that you have a close proximity to the people you want to help, but then you have access to people who can help them, who also are familiar with the culture and well integrated and have stable internet and stable computing and these types of things. So it's nice to be here. It's very educational, and it helps refine and focus the mission, and it helps really push us towards improving the systems of the world for everyone everywhere. And we learn a lot in the process, and it inspires us in the process, my company and the people with me. And we certainly brought a lot of great people. We brought Harris from the governance team and Tony Rose from the identity team. And we have all the usual suspects like Jer and Tam and others, and some new faces as well. So that's Mongolia in a nutshell. And I have a special thing to show you guys as well. So Mongolians always give you good gifts. Check that out. So this is a short bow that you use on the back of a horse for all the archery practices that allowed them to be great hunters and conquer the world. And yes, I am going to take up Mongolian horse archery at some point. Be a lot of fun. Okay, first question. Charles, constructive criticism. Wish you would take a look now in the first world now solutions. Well, August, the problem is that the first world doesn't need a lot of the things that we're selling. And second, where they do need it, regulators prevent us from doing things. So every single market in the financial industry is usually heavily regulated. And there's good reasons for that, as we've seen with Celsius and Luna and these other things. So that regulation biases incumbents, and it's very slow to allow any notion of innovation. It's why you pay high fees at the bank. It's why credit cards are the way that they are. It's why everything is so annoying. And it's why you see very few new successful entrants in the financial industry. Regulation, they say, is for consumer protection, but usually it's for incumbency protection and anti-competitiveness. Then you look at the rest of the world, and there are 3 billion people who are underbanked or unbanked, and the governments that they live under are more willing to innovate with you, remove red tape, and allow you to try new and innovative business models. Now, if those models are global, they're peer-to-peer, and they're very low cost, they will work everywhere in the world, including America and Europe. And then policymakers are going to start getting a lot of questions from their constituents of, why is it the people in Mongolia and Ethiopia and other places have a better banking system, identity system, and a more fair financial system than we have in the United States? And the only answer they'll be able to give is, well, the reason for that is that our laws protect powerful people and powerful corporate interests. So you're just going to have to accept a substandard system. At some point, people will vote those policymakers out, and the new ones will change the system to open up these markets and allow them to be a bit more fair. Now, cynicism aside, there is some progress like the Financial Innovation Act and these other things that could make the United States, Europe, and other places really attractive and interesting markets to work in. But there's a huge amount of uncertainty right now. There's anti-clarity where regulators will say one thing and then say another thing through enforcement, in some cases be contradictory and inconsistent. So, what do? You innovate and, you build global solutions. And my company is very focused on the developing world. Cardano is a general purpose protocol. Anybody can use Cardano at any time to build anywhere. And there's over 1,000 dApp developers doing that right now for different verticals, from DEXs and so forth. The vast majority, the volume of those dApps that are being deployed or are deployed on Cardano are currently from European and American interests. So there's certainly people that are very focused on first world now solutions, but it's a much more complicated puzzle, I'd say, than most people let on. Please talk about Cardano and quantum cryptography, especially the announcement of government quantum cryptographic schemes. So Latipak is referencing the NIST standards for quantum crypto. Big winners were the Crystals framework. So congratulations to lattice-based crypto, and unsurprisingly Sphinx, which is best-in-class stateless hash-based crypto. So I did talk to NIST prior to NIST announcing this, and they said that the full thing will come out 2023, but 2022, they've had most of the bulk of the work done. Now that the cryptographic primitives are standardized, we are in a position where, sorry, there's a lot of chimes over there. Now that most of the cryptographic primitives have been standardized, we are in a position where hardware will start being built towards it. So ASICs will be constructed, and a massive slew of research will go into the primitives that have been selected, and people are going to build whole systems on top of it. So it's not necessary today for the remainder of the original Cardano roadmap to make a post-quantum Cardano. It was always a stretch goal, but the crypto just wasn't there, and the standards weren't there. Now that standards are there, I think it would be very wise for the next 5 years of Cardano to focus on swapping out or adding capabilities to embrace crystals, the lattice-based framework. So signature scheme, a post-quantum VRF, quantum things related to privacy, and ultimately model a quantum adversary against a consensus algorithm. And I think these things together will enable basically Cardano to be end-to-end immune to a quantum computer, as far as we know. It's hard to say because the hardware is not there, so you can't test it and say, well, it doesn't do anything. But for known algorithms, and lattice-based crypto is a really cool area. There's a lot of depth to it. It's more complicated, and there are downsides for lattice-based cryptography and for all post-quantum crypto. The downsides principally are that the key sizes are much larger, the signature sizes are much larger, the verification times are much longer, and it does take a lot of effort to implement these things. And because they're more involved, the complexity of the cryptographic protocols means that there's a higher chance of problems from bad implementations, side channel attacks, backdoors in the implementations, code issues where the semantical translation is not right, little things like that. Crystals won't work from Andre Papa. Thank you, armchair cryptographic expert on YouTube. Very glad that you're here. Now, this is an interesting one. Thoughts on the Hunter Biden cover-up? This is just a great example of media double standards and bias. When people believe something and have an agenda, how easy it is for them to focus on one person but not another, or to excuse the behavior of another person. We all do this as humans, and we all have fuck ups in our families. Hunter Biden is a pretty scummy fuck up. He's clearly taking videos of himself measuring drugs with hookers in different countries, and he's just not a good guy. That's not the problem. If you have a family member, a friend, a son, a relative who has a drug addiction or is a scumbag, that's not the father's fault. That's not the mother's fault. That's not the brother's fault. That's not fair. We've gone past that in society of saying the sins of the son are sins of the father. The bigger issue is, are people using their relationships and their political access to monetize? This is what happens in corrupt regimes. Oh, I'm brother with the president, so I can get you a meeting with him. Now, there's always been in society a bit of tolerance for this type of behavior. We all kind of accept that if you're brothers with the president, maybe you have a way of introducing. Okay. Where it becomes unacceptable is if you say things like, well, if you give me $100,000, then I'll introduce you to my brother who's the president. That's wrong, and it's a crime. It's corruption. So the question is there evidence of that occurring? And you have a situation where something that should be a criminal justice investigation has become a political issue. And if you're a Democrat, you say, with no evidence at all, yes. And if you're a Republican, you say, well, because of the laptop, yes. And there's some emails. Now, ordinarily, there would be two institutions that would investigate this and provide some truth to it. One institution would be the Department of Justice. The other institution would be the media. And both of them have the capacity and ability to expose corruption and have done so many times. The problem with Hunter Biden is both institutions are not trusted because they actually picked a side. On the case of the media, they chose to say something that was real, wasn't real, and censor people who attempted to explore that because they felt it could impact an election. And in the case of the Department of Justice, it happens that the father of the person they would investigate is the president, who's their boss. So what do you do in these situations? You have an independent investigator look into it so that you have some notion of objectivity, and then you take a look and see if there's corruption. And there probably is, because there's a character deficit there, and it's easy to believe that that person went down that road. And then, it happens, and this shows you the consequences of propaganda with people. If there are Democrats listening to this right now, they instantly, viscerally say, well, what about Trump? What about Trump? You notice we're not talking about Trump at all. This has nothing to do with Trump. Zero, zilch. This has nothing to do with your most hated person with the political party you disagree with. This has everything to do with the specific facts and circumstances of the specific president today. And it's just a question of, do we live in a nation where we're tolerant of people monetizing family connections? And in some cases, against the best interest of the United States. And if you're comfortable with that because you politically agree with the person, okay. If you're not comfortable with that, shouldn't there be an independent investigation? Because there indeed is enough evidence in the public domain. There people who aren't qualified being put on boards and making millions of dollars, it doesn't sit right. It doesn't taste right. And you know what? An IG can look into many things, an independent investigator. They could look into other White House administrations, and perhaps that should be the standard. I don't have all the answers, but it's just very distasteful. And it's just an issue where something that should be investigated by two institutions is not. Instead of asking the question, why are those institutions not doing it and clearing people, we turn it into a political issue. And if you're on Team Blue, you have a side, and you're on Team Red, you have a side. Hunter Biden could be completely innocent of the allegations. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't have all the evidence. The point is, there's enough there, and there's enough suspicion there that a reasonable person would conduct an investigation. If anything, just to ensure that the president is cleared. You have to hold the presidency to a very high standard because they're endowed with so much power and information. And if there's compromising factors, that's an issue. Everybody seemed to be completely okay with that assertion when Trump was under investigation for nearly 2 years about Russia collusion. That was a good thing to do. I remember every week on Saturday Night Live, Alec Baldwin would be there, and they had Robert De Niro as Robert Mueller, and they're talking about how he's going to go to jail and all these things. And that was just the thing, and totally appropriate. And we were okay with that as a society. But apparently we're not when the other political side does something, because the people who decide norms happen to be in that camp. This is not how you run a society. It's not how you run an organization. You start with principles and values. You don't start with politics. And you apply them equally to everybody and fairly to everybody. And again, if you feel they were not fairly applied to Trump, well, then apply them. I will remind everybody listening that 1 million Americans have died from COVID. I'll remind everybody listening that our economy was badly damaged from the response to COVID. We now have 9% official inflation. I would argue it's 20 to 25%. The largest wealth transfer in American history has happened. For-profit companies were given billions of dollars to build products, told they have no risk in deploying those products, they cannot be sued, and given guaranteed marketplaces for those products. When we had the Defense Production Act, and we didn't have to do that. No one in Washington wants to conduct an investigation into the origins of COVID and the response to it. No congressional hearings, none of this stuff. Apparently, we just forget it and move on. 1 million Americans died, more than World War II. But the most important investigation is the January 6th hearing right now. That's where politics are at. That's how people choose to spend their time. Hi, Charles. Will Cardano be ISO 222 compliant? Yeah, I've asked about it, and we have a team looking at it. It's a collection of standards. Some would be relevant to us, and some would not be relevant to us. So we'll figure it out. Thanks, Charles, for AMAs. Have you heard of Canada's Bill C-11 trying to regulate the internet streaming services? It wouldn't surprise me. I'm not familiar with that particular piece of legislation, but there's been a marked increase in totalitarianism up north. And there seems to be a group of people there that's want to run everything from cradle to grave. Politically, I've always been a libertarian, so I get uncomfortable with these things, but I don't know. I don't think you should discriminate packets of information, electrons, and thoughts, and say some are appropriate and some are not. I just always have felt that way, but I'm not familiar with it, so I can't speak on it. But I just know what I've seen and what I've heard from my Canadian friends up north.